The earth was battered beyond recognition. Cities, once bustling with life, lay in ruins. Abandoned homes and cracked streets spoke of the devastation that had followed in the wake of the Galactic War. Humanity had fought in it. Wasn't supposed to end like this. No one had imagined it would come to this. The humans had fought valiantly alongside other races, and yet now they were left broken. A shell of what they once were. The Zenthari Empire that had once threatened the galaxy had been defeated, but at such a heavy cost. It was as if the universe had given humanity a cruel joke to play, and in the silence that followed they were forced to pick up the pieces left behind by the war. Their cities reduced to rubble, their families scattered, their hope fractured, but deep inside humanity burned with a determination that refused to die. There was a fire here, a stubbornness that was at the core of every human heart. While others would have surrendered or collapsed into hopelessness, humanity stood defiant, even in the face of their greatest humiliation. The Zenthari had imposed the harshest of reparations, demanding payments so steep that they knew Earth would never survive without bending to their will. The treaty was signed by reluctant leaders. It was forced upon them as the last option, a desperate plea to stop the death of billions. And yet it felt like a death sentence in itself. The cost of survival was clear. It wasn't just Earth's resources that the Zenthari wanted. They demanded labor technology and a promise that humanity would never rise again from the ashes of its defeat. And so Earth's people were left to toil under their thumb, under the watchful eye of their conquerors. It seemed hopeless at first. The promise of rebellion had felt distant, like a dream that had long since passed. But as time went on, things began to change. There were whispers, at first quiet murmurs, in the back alleys of surviving cities. People gathered in hidden rooms, speaking of something greater than survival, something that could give humanity a chance at redemption, a chance to reclaim what was stolen from them, from their pride, their dignity, their place in the universe. There were those who had already begun working on it, new technologies hidden away from the eyes of the Zenthari people, who had not given up, not completely. Some refused to accept the crushing reality, and instead saw an opportunity buried beneath the rubble, an opportunity to make humanity's mark on the galaxy, not as subjugated slaves, but as a force to be reckoned with. And it wasn't just the scientists and engineers that were starting to believe. It was everyone. It spread like wildfire, the idea that humanity would never be brought low again, that their time had not yet passed. In secret laboratories and abandoned bunkers, hidden from the eyes of the world, humankind's greatest minds labored day and night, not for survival, but for something more. They were determined to create a new path, something the Zenthari had not prepared for, something they couldn't understand. Humanity's greatest weapon was not in their technology alone, but in their very nature. They could adapt and innovate. They could turn what seemed like defeat into a weapon of unimaginable power. And as the days went by, the tide of humanity's spirit began to shift like a sleeping giant, slowly waking up from a long and painful slumber. They were coming back to life. And no one, not even the Zenthari, knew what would happen when they finally did. In the shadows of Earth's broken cities, something was stirring like the first tremors before an earthquake. People who had once been silenced by the weight of their own despair began to speak again in hushed tones, but their words carried a promise, a belief that could not be extinguished, not by war, not by the Zenthari, not by anything. The idea was simple yet profound. Humanity could rise again. They would rise again. And when they did, the galaxy would remember them as something far more than a footnote in the history of the stars. Across the globe, in hidden basements and forgotten spaces, laboratories and tech hubs from all corners of the world, the whispers of defiance became louder and louder. One by one, humans came together from all walks of life to forge something new, to build something the galaxy had never seen before. Their minds were unbound by tradition or the limitations placed on them by others. They had nothing left to lose, so they threw everything they had into the effort. It was a new kind of warfare, one built not on brute strength, but on intellect, innovation, and the very essence of human will. The first signs of their progress were subtle at first. A small group of scientists managed to reverse engineer a piece of Zenthari technology, recovered during the war. It wasn't much, just a few fragments of a once great machine, but it was enough to ignite a spark in the minds of Earth's engineers. They had something to build upon. They had something to fight for. Slowly, at first, new designs began to emerge, cloaking technology, energy, Shield's adaptive weapon systems tools to give humanity the edge they needed to finally stand on their own. Once more they worked in secret, and their progress was unseen by the rest of the galaxy. The Zenthari watched as Earth's people toiled under their yoke, believing them to be a broken people resigned to their fate. They had no idea that while they were blind to humanity's growth, humans were adapting, learning, mastering the very technology that had once been their oppressors' greatest strength. In the silence of Earth's cities, new alliances were forged, two alliances that were not visible to the naked eye, but strong in their resolve. Humans connected with distant planets through encrypted channels. They reached out to the oppressed and the downtrodden in the galaxy. They whispered of hope. They spoke of a future where they would no longer be bound to the will of the strongest, but of a galaxy where freedom was the birthright of all. They found like-minded beings who saw in humanity a mirror of their own struggles and fears. They were not alone. The rebellion was growing not just on Earth, but in every corner of the galaxy, slowly at first. But with each passing day their ranks swelled as more species found common cause with the humans. They had long been seen as a backward species, unworthy of their place in the stars. But now they were a symbol, a beacon for anyone who had suffered under the boot of tyranny. And as humanity's hidden strength began to grow, so too did their conviction. No longer were they simply enduring, no longer were they just surviving, they were fighting back. And they were going to win. They were going to prove that even in the darkest hours when all seemed lost, humanity would rise, and it would strike back against those who had fought to crush it. The Zenthari might have thought they had broken Earth, but they were wrong. They had only set in motion the forces that would lead to their downfall. In the hidden corners of Earth, the first signs of humanity's revolution began to appear, like the quiet hum of a machine coming to life. They started small, a few scattered projects, a handful of engineers tinkering with alien artifacts, a few daring souls who had the courage to dream of something greater. But soon those quiet whispers turned into something more. It was no longer just a dream, it was becoming a reality. Pieces of technology, once thought impossible, began to take shape in secret facilities across the planet, cloaked in darkness and secrecy. Their creators worked tirelessly to turn the tide, and with each breakthrough, humanity found itself one step closer to something more than mere survival, something more than just a broken species scraping by in the ashes of their past. They were starting to see a future where they were not the weak, they were the strong. It wasn't just the engineers and scientists who were working behind closed doors. It was the soldiers too, those who had once fought in the war and had seen the depths of humanity's suffering. They became the leaders of this new revolution. Their experience in the field had shown them that the galaxy was not a place for mercy and kindness. It was a place of power and strength where the weak were trampled and the strong ruled. And they had learned the hardest lesson of all: no one would ever give you anything, you had to take it. They began to form their own networks, reaching out to other disenfranchised factions across the galaxy. They started small, offering training and supplies to those in need, slowly at first. But as word spread, so did their influence. Soon it wasn't just a rebellion on Earth, but across dozens of systems in the galaxy. The spark of hope they had kindled began to spread in ways no one had expected. The human engineers had begun working on more than just weapons. They had begun creating systems that would enable humanity to dominate in ways the galaxy had never seen before. Energy shields that could deflect the most powerful attacks, cloaking technology that could make entire fleets vanish from sight, drones that could execute complex strategies with pinpoint precision, and biological enhancements that could turn ordinary humans into super soldiers, faster, stronger, more resilient than ever before. Each new innovation made humanity a more formidable force in the galaxy, and while their creations were still in their infancy, they were growing at an exponential rate. A quiet revolution was unfolding across the stars, and it wasn't long before it caught the attention of the galaxy's larger powers. The Zenthari believed humanity was too weak to ever rise again. But they underestimated something far more dangerous than their technology. They underestimated human will, the desire not just to survive, but to thrive. The human spirit was never meant to be crushed. No matter the cost, no matter the sacrifices, humans would keep pushing, keep fighting for what they believed in, for what they had lost. They had been crushed underfoot before, but now they were getting back up. They were learning to walk again, and they would make their enemies regret ever thinking they could break them. By the time the galaxy started to notice the changes happening on Earth, it was already too late. The forces that humanity had quietly been building were about to take their first real step into the spotlight. The Zenthari had no idea what was coming, but they would soon learn that humanity's strength was not just in its technology, it was in its unshakable belief that no matter how dark the galaxy got, no matter how impossible the odds were, they would rise, they would strike, and they would make their mark on the universe forever. The galaxy was beginning to stir as humanity's quiet revolution started to echo through the stars. What had once been whispers in the dark now began to surface in the form of strange disturbances, strange messages intercepted by the Galactic Council, and rumors from distant systems of ships that appeared and disappeared without warning. Each new report painted a picture of something shifting, of something stirring deep in the heart of Earth's broken world. The Zenthari had grown complacent, believing their dominance was unchallenged, believing that humanity had been subdued forever. But they were wrong. The humans had never truly bent the knee. Instead, they had used the time to rebuild their strength, quietly assembling the tools and allies needed to strike when the time was right. Earth's technology had progressed far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Given the circumstances, the Zenthari had thought they had broken humanity's spirit, but they had underestimated the resilience of the human race. As the first few encounters with Earth's forces began, the Zenthari were blindsided. A small fleet of ships appeared in an uncharted sector, carrying human-made weapons and technology that left even their best commanders baffled. The humans were using tactics they had never seen before. Their ships darting in and out of hyperspace, their weapons hitting with deadly precision, their military strategies executed flawlessly. It was clear the humans were not just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting for something greater. And it wasn't just Earth's ships that had been upgraded. Their forces were also evolving. With each battle, humans had learned to work as one body, a synchronized machine of warriors and thinkers. They adapted quickly on the battlefield, and that ability was something the Zenthari could not account for. Soon humanity was sending messages to the galaxy far beyond their own borders. The messages were simple but powerful, calls to those who had been oppressed, calls to those who had suffered under the rule of the strongest to rise up and join them in the fight for freedom. One by one, systems began to respond, slowly at first, but steadily. The oppressed races who had once been crushed under the heel of their overlords began to see something in humanity that they hadn't seen in their own people, a spark of defiance, that they too could nurture a fire that could not be extinguished. Humanity wasn't just fighting for their own survival anymore. They were fighting for the freedom of every species that had ever been enslaved by tyranny. And the message was clear: join them, or be crushed alongside those who believed in the old ways. The Zenthari watched in horror as their once controlled systems began to fracture. Entire fleets defected to the human cause, as those who had been silenced for so long finally found their voices. Humanity's revolution was no longer confined to Earth. It was becoming a galaxy-wide movement, and every time a Zenthari fleet was destroyed or a planet freed, humanity grew stronger, their influence expanding in ways the galactic empires could not fathom. And then the first true act of rebellion took place. Earth's forces launched a coordinated strike against a key Zenthari stronghold, a heavily fortified planet that had been used to oppress and enslave entire populations. It was a calculated risk, one that could either shatter the Zenthari's hold on the galaxy or send humanity into oblivion. But the humans had a new weapon, one that even the Zenthari did not anticipate. Their ships came out of hyperspace with perfect timing, appearing from nowhere like shadows in the night, and the battle that followed was nothing short of a spectacle. The Zenthari fleet was caught off guard, their defense systems unable to react in time, and as humanity's forces tore through the defenses, it was clear that the tide was changing. The human rebellion had begun in earnest, and the ripple effect across the galaxy was undeniable. The battle that had raged over the Zenthari stronghold was just the beginning. It had been a message, a declaration that humanity was no longer the broken species it had once been. The humans had tasted victory, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Zenthari Empire was shaken to its core, And as the first of their military fleets was destroyed, the once untouchable empire started to realize just how dangerous humanity had become. They could no longer ignore the rising power of Earth or the growing rebellion that had spread like wildfire across the stars. Their prideful arrogance had clouded their judgment for too long, and now they were paying the price as humanity's victories mounted. The galaxy began to take notice. Systems that had once been neutral or aligned with the Zenthari began to rethink their positions. Old alliances were shattered, and new ones were formed under the banner of freedom, led by the humans whose cause was no longer just about survival. It was about rewriting the rules of the galaxy itself. The Zenthari had no choice but to escalate their response, but it was too late. Their attempts to crush the rebellion only seemed to strengthen it. With each defeat, humanity's forces grew more organized, more efficient. They had developed new strategies, honed their tactics, and crafted weapons so advanced that even the most experienced commanders in the Zenthari fleet were stunned. Humanity had managed to take what they had learned from their enemies and turn it against them in ways no one had anticipated. Their cloaking technology made them almost invisible on the battlefield. Their weapons fired with such precision that entire fleets were wiped out in minutes, and their soldiers were no longer mere men and women, but elite fighters enhanced through technology. Their physical abilities amplified to levels that surpassed even the most formidable species. The Zenthari were no longer the predators in the galaxy. Humanity had become the apex hunters. The human rebellion was not just fighting for freedom, it was fighting for something more, for a future where no species would be oppressed, no planet would be held captive, no one would ever be forced to bend the knee to an empire that ruled through fear. Humanity was no longer a victim, it was a force of nature, and as they pushed further into Zenthari territory, their impact could be felt throughout the galaxy. Entire sectors were freed one by one. Systems began to declare their allegiance to the human cause, and with every victory, the power of the rebellion grew stronger. Humanity's message was resonating across the stars. Their call for justice, freedom, and equality struck a chord with species who had been subjugated for generations. They too wanted a chance at freedom. They too wanted to stand beside the humans who had risen from the ashes to become something far greater than anyone had expected. Meanwhile, Earth's leaders and military commanders continued to evolve their strategies. Their ultimate goal had never been to simply win a war, it was to reshape the galaxy itself. And with each new alliance forged and each new battle won, they were closer to their vision. The humans were not fighting just for themselves, they were fighting for a new order where power was not based on tyranny, but on cooperation, unity, and shared strength. The galaxy had once been a place where the strong crushed the weak, but now humanity was changing that narrative, showing that it was possible for the oppressed to rise up and build something better, something lasting. The Zenthari Empire was beginning to fracture under the pressure of this new reality, and they didn't know how to stop it. They had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they were paying the price for their arrogance. And so the war raged on. With each battle, humanity grew bolder, their victories becoming more spectacular, their forces more unstoppable, and the ripple of their defiance continued to spread across the galaxy like a tidal wave that could not be contained. The Zenthari might have been powerful, but humanity was something they had never seen before. The Zenthari Empire was no longer the unstoppable force it once had been. Its control over the galaxy was slipping away with every passing day. Their once mighty fleets were being decimated one by one. Entire worlds that had once bowed to their will now stood proudly with humanity. The rebellion had grown so strong, so widespread, that it could no longer be ignored or contained. The Zenthari knew they had to act quickly if they hoped to salvage their crumbling empire. But no matter how hard they tried, their response was always too little, too late. Humanity had already forged too many alliances, and their tactics had evolved to the point where the Zenthari could not predict them. Every counterattack they launched was met with overwhelming force. Their fleets scattered before humanity's relentless onslaught. The Zenthari could feel their empire unraveling like a thread pulled from the fabric of the galaxy, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The human forces were now a well-oiled machine. Their fleets had grown larger, their weapons more advanced, and their tactics more refined. With each victory, they took new worlds and liberated more people who had been living under the Zenthari's heel for centuries. Humanity's leadership had become more unified, more determined than ever before. They had a vision of the galaxy where freedom and equality were the rights of all beings, not just the privileged few, and they were willing to fight and die to make that vision a reality. They were no longer the underdogs, no longer the weak. The humans had become the architects of a new future, one where the Zenthari would be nothing more than a footnote in history. While the war raged on, the galaxy's inhabitants began to realize that humanity's rise was not just about defeating the Zenthari. It was about something far greater. It was about rebuilding the galaxy itself. The human rebellion was bringing hope to the oppressed everywhere. It was showing that no matter how powerful the empire, no matter how long the chains, the will to fight for freedom could never be extinguished. It was a message that resonated deeply with species all across the galaxy who had suffered in silence for too long under the thumb of tyrants and conquerors. They began to rally behind humanity's cause, offering supplies, support, and soldiers to the growing rebellion. The galaxy was awakening to the reality that humanity's fight for freedom was a fight that belonged to all sentient beings who valued liberty and justice. And as humanity's forces pushed further into the heart of Zenthari space, the once impenetrable strongholds of the Empire fell one by one. With every victory, their influence spread further and further, until it seemed that nothing could stop them. The Zenthari were desperate. They turned to their most ruthless commanders and generals, hoping to rally their forces for one last stand. But it was clear to everyone that the Empire was in its final days. They could not keep up with humanity's relentless pace and their ability to adapt and innovate at every turn. They had no answer to the rebellion that was sweeping across the galaxy. In the depths of the Zenthari capital, the leaders of the Empire held a secret meeting. It was clear to them now that their empire was doomed. They had underestimated humanity's resolve, and they had failed to see the true power that lay in the human spirit. They had thought that by crushing Earth they would break humanity's will, but all they had done was awaken something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Now, the Zenthari were faced with an impossible choice: continue fighting a losing war and risk total annihilation, or surrender and face the consequences of their actions. Humanity was not asking for their surrender, they were demanding it, and they would accept nothing less than total victory. The galaxy stood on the brink of a new dawn, and it was clear to all that humanity's rebellion was no longer a fleeting dream. It was a movement that had reshaped the very fabric of the galaxy. The Zenthari Empire, which had once seemed invincible, was now crumbling beneath the weight of humanity's relentless march. Their fleets were decimated, their strongholds shattered, and their once great leaders were reduced to desperate shadows of their former selves. Humanity had not just fought to survive, they had fought to bring down an empire that had oppressed and enslaved the galaxy for millennia. And now they were standing at the precipice of victory. The galaxy had begun to recognize the undeniable truth: humanity was no longer the underdog. They were the force to be reckoned with, the true power in the galaxy, and the Zenthari knew their time was running out. The Zenthari leadership was fractured, divided over how to handle the unstoppable force that humanity had become. Some still believed they could win if they threw everything they had left into one final assault, but others knew that it was too late. They had lost too much ground to turn back the clock now, and even if they could muster enough forces to strike back, they would never be able to defeat humanity's will. The humans had something the Zenthari could never understand. They had hope, and that hope had become their greatest weapon. The rebellion had grown so powerful, so widespread, that the galaxy had begun to see them not just as freedom fighters, but as the new architects of the future. Humanity's fight was not just for their own survival, but for the survival of every species that had been crushed beneath the weight of tyranny and oppression. And with each new victory, their influence spread like wildfire through the stars. On Earth, the leaders of the rebellion gathered in secret to discuss their next move. Their war for freedom had reached its apex, and they knew that the time had come to finally bring the fight to the Zenthari capital. They had prepared for this moment for years. Their forces were ready, their allies were in place, and the technology they had developed over the years had become so advanced that they could launch a final assault on the heart of the empire itself. The Zenthari would not expect it. They would not be prepared for what was coming. Humanity's forces had become like a tidal wave, unstoppable in their momentum, and the Zenthari would soon see just how powerful their former captors had become. Across the galaxy, the final stages of the revolution were in motion. Fleets of ships gathered in the deepest reaches of space, massive battleships, and sleek stealth vessels carrying troops and resources to strike at the heart of the Zenthari Empire. Planets that had long been oppressed were preparing to rise up against their former masters and join the humans in their final push to freedom. It was all coming together. The rebellion had gained momentum in ways the Zenthari had never expected, and now they were about to feel the full force of humanity's united strength. The day of reckoning had come, and the humans were ready. They had taken everything the Zenthari had thrown at them, and more. They had been pushed to the edge, and they had come back stronger and more determined than ever before. The final assault on the Zenthari capital would be their greatest challenge, but it would also be their most glorious victory. They were not just fighting for their survival anymore. They were fighting for a new galaxy, a new order where no one would ever again have to suffer under the rule of tyrants, and the humans would lead the charge into that future. The Zenthari Empire had ruled for far too long, but the time had come for it to fall, and humanity would be the ones to bring it crashing down. The final battle was set to begin, and across the galaxy the air was thick with anticipation. Humanity's forces gathered in the dark expanse of space, ready to strike at the heart of the Zenthari Empire. Their fleets positioned at the edge of Zenthari-controlled space, and ready to launch a full-scale assault on the capital. The Zenthari had prepared for this moment, too, believing they could defend their homeworld one last time. But they were gravely mistaken. They had no idea what humanity had truly become, no idea how far the humans had come, how much they had sacrificed, and how much they had already won. The rebellion had grown so powerful that even the Zenthari's most advanced weapons and defense systems were no match for the humans' innovation and determination. Humanity had learned to turn every disadvantage into an opportunity. They had mastered the art of warfare, and now they were about to unleash it on their oppressors with devastating force. The final assault would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, and the Zenthari would soon find themselves in the crosshairs of their most dangerous adversary yet. As the human forces moved into position across the vast expanse of space, a powerful wave of energy washed over the battlefield. It was the signal. The moment humanity had been preparing for the attack began. With precision and ferocity, the human ships slipped through the Zenthari defenses like shadows, vanishing and reappearing with pinpoint accuracy, their weapons striking from unexpected angles, overwhelming the Zenthari's best efforts to retaliate. Humanity's tactics were flawless. Their ships, now equipped with technology that surpassed the Zenthari's own fleets, tore through their defenses like paper cutting through fabric, and their forces pressed forward toward the Zenthari capital without hesitation. On the surface of the Zenthari homeworld, the leaders of the Empire had gathered in their command center. Their faces were grim as they watched the battle unfold on their screens. Their final defenses were being torn apart. Humanity's forces had arrived, and there was nothing left to stop them. The Zenthari Empire had never faced an enemy like this. They had always been the ones to conquer the weak, to oppress the helpless. But now they were the ones on the receiving end of a ruthless assault, and they were helpless to stop it. The Zenthari Empire was unraveling before their eyes. Their once mighty military had been shattered, their cities were burning, and the once proud empire was now on the brink of collapse. The humans had come for them with everything they had, and there was no escape, no place left to hide. And as humanity's forces descended on the capital, the Zenthari leaders realized the truth. They had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity. They had thought them weak, but they had underestimated the power of human resolve, the power of a people fighting for their survival, their freedom, their future. And now that power was tearing the Zenthari Empire apart piece by piece. And then it happened. The final strike. Humanity's forces landed on the Zenthari homeworld, and the capital city was obliterated in an explosion that shook the galaxy to its core. It was the end, the moment the galaxy had been waiting for. The Zenthari were no more. Their empire was gone, and humanity had emerged victorious. But the victory was not just for Earth, it was for every species that had been oppressed, every system that had been enslaved. Humanity had changed the course of history. They had toppled an empire, and in its place, a new galaxy was born, one where freedom, equality, and hope would reign, where no one would ever again have to suffer under the thumb of tyranny, and humanity would lead the way into that bright future. The ripple that had started on Earth had now spread across the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same again.